So with Module 7, Advanced Controls, I've covered most of these already in the previous videos. So we're going to just recap on what those were, and then we're going to look at the uns we haven't covered yet and explain how they work, and they're quite straightforward. The term Advanced Controls is kind of weird because they're not really that advanced, as you'll see. So when we look at the available controls we're talking about, there's 6 of these. 2 of them are what we call logic actions, and these will basically run the flow down a certain particular path depending on the outcome of a property or a field that we test. So that will be condition and switch. Apply to each and do until are looping actions. They will repeat the same actions within the flow over and over again until another outcome is reached. Scope is very, very simple, and we'll look at some lovely perks you can do and use with scope, some of which are not in the course. And again, terminate is very straightforward. It allows you to stop the flow at a mid particular point. This is on the outcome of a circumstance no longer required, or it could be on the result of an action that created an error. So there we go. Let's have a look at the first ones first, the condition and the switch case. A condition allows us to set up an expression or a structure where it has to report back as true or false. So in this case, my example that I did with the pending items, I was asking if the status value of each item was approved. And if true, then it went down one path, and if false, it went down another path. But the conditions can be completely customized to suit your needs. So I may say the status value is equal to approved, and then underneath it I can add a row and say where, let's go and grab another value where the item itself does not contain the word paper. Maybe the paper is ordered from a different supplier, or it's ordered by a different person. So I want them all listed in one single SharePoint list, but I'm responsible for everything other than paper. So with this I'm saying if it is equal to approved and it does not contain paper, then they're mine, and I would make sure that these are used as an and. In other words, the outcome of both of these is equal to true, then the result will then become true. If any one of them is false, then it passes down the other side. The alternative is use an or. So it's looking for either one of them to be true. If either one is true, then it goes down the yes side. If both of them are false, then it goes down the no side. So you can specify the conditions based on the structure required for the content. But this allows me to test different properties with different circumstances and combining the options together as a solution. Where I was testing one property with multiple outcomes, the condition can be used, but it's too complex and would make the flow unnecessarily hard to manage. So instead I can use a switch. The switch allows us to test one particular property or expression of my own choice, and then I can write as many outcomes as I want. And to do that, I specify the case. So this would be if the case is that it's draft, and I have a case draft that moves it to append and then moves it to approved or declined. I might want a process that says, okay, what if this was rejected? And what if I want a case where the user had cancelled the stationary order in the first place? So with these I can have as many outcomes as I want, which is very useful for status fields and anything that marks the life cycle of your information as it goes along. And switch is very common for using that in outcomes if you're putting it into the same flow, which is great. I could alternatively put these into different flows and have the flow trigger based on the value individually. So there's so many different permutations that we can do with this, but switch is just a way of testing multiple values against one property. Apply to each was a nice and manageable way of going through a collection of items and then being able to process certain actions across each and every item. This is a method of looping where we know the maximum number of times that we wish to repeat the actions. Okay, so this is going to go through many items. What if the circumstance is that this is going through hundreds or thousands of items? There could be 50 or 60 requests this week, and I'm thinking our budget can't handle that. What I want to do is I actually want to go through all these items and just keep doing it until we reach a count of 10 requests, and then I want to stop, and the others would have to go over to the next week or something. So we're looking at budget. So I can use the apply to each, but what I'm going to do inside that is add an action that then uses a do until. So go through every item, hundreds of them. When you find the first 10, stop doing it anymore. So I'm going to go and do a control, do until, and what I want to use to identify this is the int item count. So I'm going to say when the int item count, and I'm just going to be safe, it should be equal to, but as a programmer's nightmare is when it sort of for some reason skips and goes beyond 10 and carries on. So I'm going to say it's greater than or equal to 10. So when it gets 10 or above, stop, shouldn't be doing it anymore. And that's it. And then what I can do is process these actions inside that. So it gets all the hundreds or thousands of items, but it's only going to get the requested item and the condition. I have to do these in a copy and paste because they're melded together. There we go. One. And then I'll copy the entire condition and paste that in there as well. And then I can then go and remove the original ones. There we go. Just delete them. Oops, delete that one first and then delete that one afterwards. There we go. So go through all the hundreds of records and then keep going on until we reach the item count of 10, and then only order 10 of those many items in the list. Just an example of using the do until. They don't have to sit inside each other. I've just done it because I've pulled in lots and lots of items and I only want to process 10 of them, so they do work independently of each other. The last two controls is scope and terminate. Scope is a great way of packaging lots of actions into one group. Now this makes life easier in many respects. So I've got my get profile and I've got my add row into a table, and this is the one that sort of processes all the data and puts it into a spreadsheet. So let's say I've got other actions going on below that. So that's to send an email. Let's say I'm going to do a sort of HTML table as well. Lots of different things going on that I would like to do. But these two topics basically are paired together. They do a group. They do something as a solution, if you like. And I need both actions as a solution. So what I can do is I can add above them a scope. And then I could then place inside the scope the appropriate actions. And then the scope would be renamed get profile info and add to table. Now there's multiple purposes why this is useful. One, it simplifies the flow when you've got lots and lots of actions and you've got many actions that do a particular routine or a particular task. It makes it easier to summarize them. Secondly, if I want to reuse that sort of collection of actions again somewhere else because I do similar tasks, I can now copy that entire scope, and that will allow me to copy and paste all those actions in one go rather than doing them individually. The other thing which is really handy is when I have parallel branching. Parallel branching is used for many purposes. We covered some of the essentials, but what if I want to specify where something's failed, and the failure could be on either for whatever reason we couldn't get the profile, or for whatever reason we couldn't add the data into the table. For example, the profile the person used is not a licensed E3 account, therefore can't work with Excel. Maybe it's an unlicensed account, maybe it's a guest, whatever the case is. Maybe the add and row to table was working with a table that's already open and checked out. So collectively, I could show different actions or different sort of emails to say, couldn't do this, couldn't do that. What I'd rather do is have a parallel action that just says the whole of those two actions couldn't be processed for whatever purpose. I'm going to add a parallel branch, and the idea is to specify, okay, only run this email and configure it only if that was successful. And you can see it's not looking at the previous action, it's saying only if the outcome of the entire scope of actions is successful. So it's saying send an email should run only after the whole lot's worked. It doesn't matter where it failed. If it failed anywhere in there, come down the other path. So this is the other path, and I would have something like a notification sent to me that says data update from user profile failed. Copy and paste that into the box below, but please check the output for the flow. And as you can see from the trigger, we should get the date, the time the flow is triggered. So I can actually grab the timestamp of the trigger of the flow. This would give me the date that's in the flow running list, so that they can go, instead of looking through hundreds of different rows, I've now told them what date and time to look for, and they can go in there and look at that. There you go. But again, that is going to run. I'm going to go to the little option again, configure after, and say only that happen if this has failed or if it's timed out. I'm going to do 2 of those, but it's on the scope of both of those actions have failed or timed out. A very handy feature where Terminate is used is when you've got a really big flow, but you just want to test a part of it and then stop it. So you might have a lot of physical actions like deleting things, and all you want to do is test to see if the email is sent first. So what I can do is I can actually say, let's say I've got this creating an email, but after that I don't want it building a table or doing any other work. So I can terminate at that point, and then I can pass through deliberately what I want the run of the flow to send back. So I can say, well, just mark this run of the flow as failed or cancelled or succeeded, and I'm going to say, well, if I got this far, mark it succeeded, but I just don't want you to run any other actions because I'm just testing up to that point. And that's kind of a nice little feature. You can use the terminate just to stop the flow at a certain point, maybe for testing, maybe for again for debugging a particular issue. So at 3 minutes and 12 seconds, whatever it is on the previous video, stop there because you're not adding a notification, you're just going to add a terminate, and the idea is to design what the flow run should actually action as. So here's the other path, and I'm going to go in and use the control called terminate, and the idea of this is I can customize the terminate that and customize the status that the run returns as. So I'm going to sort of pass the status as failed. You can pass it as cancelled, you can pass it whatever, based on the circumstances of what that parallel path is doing. This is because it's failed. And I'm going to say code. Let's go and grab my own list of codes. I don't know, _199, message, profile, information, could not be added to table. And then I'm going to say view v, and then I'm going to go into the trigger. As you can see, the trigger passes for a load of stuff, and I'm going to pick up the timestamp. I'm going to put view the run of the flow at, and then it will have the timestamp in there. Okay, and the last thing is that I've actually customized that terminate, so it's going to stop. But what I've done is I've customized the terminate to show that detail as well. So if I go in there and configure after and say only run that if this is or is failed or is timed out. Okay, and then mark that as done. So I've now got if it's successful down one, terrible goes down the other one. I'm actually going to swap these over. I want the terminate to actually work now. So I'm going to say, it's a bit naughty, but I'm going to say only run the right one if it's failed, and then go to terminate and say do this if it's successful. I actually want to see the failure trigger. Okay, so I'm reversing it temporarily. Going to click done, going to save that, and I'm now going to test. Now it says I've put in a blank email message and didn't complete it, so let's put some stuff in there now. Yeah, I think that'll do lovely. Let's save it again, check the flow checker, and again I want this to actually test. Put in an item, put in a quantity, run flow. Okay, so it's now saying run has failed. If I go back to my flows, test has failed, and if I click back into the actual flow itself, see where the tick has popped up, and it's now passing the information. Okay, now the idea is that I can then, if someone else has taken over this flow, if there's some weird things that maybe they're not aware of, I can run the terminate to customize and then explain to them why that typically does seem to fail and what they could do to resolve it. So there's many things you can do with the terminate, but the idea is to customize your own outcome of the flow.